John, Dr. Farouk, distinguished panelists, and of course not forgetting the timekeeper. Peace be upon you and a very good morning to everyone who actually sacrificed your Saturday morning to spend time with us. I think Dr. Farouk gave a very holistic view which really exemplifies the needs for Malaysia and the current sentiments felt by many Muslims in this particular country, of course Malaysians in general. Now, if many of you who've actually found out about this program through reading the introduction, I think one key component missing from that, because if you go back to any debate, you can't just see whether Hudud or Islamic State on its own. Tariq Ramadan has always eloquently put it, you have to see the context as well as the text. So not necessarily the text that should matter, but also the context of the time. And I believe Malaysia in the 80s, one of the most memorable, momentous occasions, or momentous developments at the time, which cannot be ignored, was the Iranian Revolution. And very much, among other things, it was driven by the sentiment, the anti-Islam, the Shah was seen arguably by a lackey of America, and anything anti-Islam at the time was seen as good by the ruling elite. This gave way, of course, to Khomeini's rise, and you see, unfortunately, or fortunately at the time, Muslim movements everywhere were inspired by Khomeini's promises, and religious conservatism, the zeitgeist, marked the era at the time. I think this is important. So you put Malaysia in the larger context of the developments around the world, around the globe. Of course, you know, after that, the inspiration quickly turned sour as the revolution faced a democracy deficit and turned against many of its champions, including Ayatollahs. Ayatollahs, who were seen as progressive liberal, were sent, whether life imprisonment, and died during that stay. So, certainly, this is something that we have to take stock. And now, how markedly different is the zeitgeist, the time, the spirit that is being felt not only by Malaysia, but of course through the Arab awakenings that took place. I have to mention this because, again, when we're discussing the issue of Hudud of the Islamic State, I think it would not be wise if we don't put it in context. Now, the demand during the Arab Spring was for greater freedom, greater civil and political liberties, made not from those educated and belonging to the West, but local Arabs, local North Africans and Middle Easterners, coming together in overthrowing old, corrupt despots. And a year after the Arab uprising, the Egyptians successfully elected members in the new Legislative Assembly Parliament. The Egyptian Parliament was dominated by the Muslim Brotherhood's Freedom and Justice Party. And the Freedom and Justice Party, which is relatively a new party, was guided by principles of truth, justice and equality. And such pronouncements laid to rest the apprehension and fear stemming from alarmist international community. So I have 1 minute left. This is crazy. Okay? I thought I had at least 5 minutes more, but anyway. So, note to other speakers, if you mention the timekeeper, it doesn't mean he'll give you more time. I'm just kidding. Now, I will end with this. I will end with a recent pronouncement, decree made by none other than the Grand Sheikh of Al-Azhar, Dr. Ahmad Al-Taib, on the 8th of January 2012. Why? Because when Dr. Farouk mentioned ijtihad, it is incumbent on us to relate any laws, any policies to the current needs of the time. When people are clamoring for democracy, when people are clamoring for true multiculturalism, now this is what policymakers must do, to give meaning, to give soul to such pronouncements. Now, Dr. Ahmad outlined 4 basic freedoms, and I'm just going to touch on the first, freedom of belief. Freedom of belief and the associated right of full citizenship for all, which is based on complete equality in rights and duties, is regarded as the cornerstone in the modern social structure. This freedom is guaranteed by the authentic, conclusive religious texts and clear constitutional and legal principles. Accordingly, I will end with this, it's a timekeeper. Any aspect of compulsion, persecution or discrimination on the basis of religion is prohibited. Everybody in society has the right to embrace any ideas he chooses without encroaching upon the right of society to the maintenance of divine faiths in light of sanctity accorded to all the 3 Abrahamic faiths. So everyone is free to perform his or her rituals, and none should hurt the other's feelings or violate the sanctity of his rights, whether by words or deeds, and without breaching the public order. And I end with this final statement. If the mind and the text are apparently conflicting, the mind should be given precedence and the text reinterpreted. So, for me, it was a very powerful statement from the Grand Mufti post-Arab awakening. And again today, I ask you to really accept, breathe life into the term that Tariq Ramadan mentioned. Multiculturalism is a fact of life. There's no going for it or going against it. And that's why I feel, to a point, the topic today is rather academic, since Malaysia is a multiculturalism and we remain guided by the principles of the Federal Constitution. Thank you very much.
That you cannot sort of coerce someone into believing your beliefs, right? On ending on that note, I do want to ask a very controversial question. So what then for the LGBTIQ here, or the sexual minority here? I'd like your views on that. And because there are people who feel that just by being or by being able to love the same sex, that that goes against their religion and their beliefs, but we don't believe that. So our own beliefs are such that we will be answerable to God, yes, but let us be answerable to God. Thank you.
Well, I'm very happy to hear YB Nurul speak about freedom of religion. Does she actually apply that to Malays as well, in terms of freedom of religion? That's number one. Number two, I think it's a fallacy to believe that the Egypt now is in a better condition than it was before. Everybody knows that it's getting worse. I have a friend in Egypt and she's really not happy with what's going on over there. So I do believe YB is trying to promote an idea of an Islamic state, which is completely not true. But mainly my question is, when you speak about freedom of religion, are you actually applying to the Malays as well? Thanks.
In terms of the rights of sexual LGBT, Tariq Ramadan addressed this question when IRF organized his program. I think it was about 3 months back. And I think, of course, you're not just talking about Islam. There are limitations implemented even in Christianity with regards to people of LGBT. But one main principle is you should not victimize anyone. You should not also implement and ensure the laws of the land encroach into public space. I think that's the main underlying principle. But if you ask me whether, as a Muslim, I can accept, I think yes, you or whoever that decides their particular sexual orientation, yes, in the private space, you cannot enforce them certain regulations, etc. But as a Muslim, I also cannot accept. And that is regulation of my faith, as well as my friends who are Catholics, etc. And I think here, you want to make sure that they are not victimized. The current practice, whether through the borders how Jawi or Jakib at the time went to the borders, some books, etc. So the way it's being practiced does not respect and does not give any meaning to the sanctity of Islam or any religion for that matter. You must always use hikmah. So yes, I will say that here we have limitations, but certainly it should not be encroached into public space. The second question, with regards to what you think I'm trying to promote, I would correct that assumption. Yes, Egypt is undergoing a tumultuous process. It has not been resolved. There are many challenges they face. I'm not saying that they've achieved a utopian ideal view of a state and how it should be governed. But I always take the developments of the Muslim Brotherhood in particular from seen as a rather dogmatic Islamic movement, but came up with a political entity to meet the needs of the times. And their relationship and collaboration with the Christian Coptics is something in particular that we have to observe and appreciate. So if you say things are bad for Egypt, no. We must not be so judgmental, and that's partly the society or the country that we have inherited that allows us to see things in black and white, whereas sometimes it is not as simple as that. Sometimes in a storming period, it is important for them to undergo, and hopefully, of course, we wish for the best. We wish that we will see wisdom and finally manage the governance of the country ASAP. But, okay, one more minute. Yes, but the idea itself, I think, goes back, and when you ask me, there's no compulsion in religion. Even Dr. Farooq quoted that verse in the Quran. How can you ask me or anyone, how can anyone really say, sorry, this only applies to non-Malays? It has to apply equally. That is the way it is. In the Quran, there's no specific term for the Malays, this is how it should be done. So I'm tied, of course, to the prevailing views, but I will say that. So what you want is, of course, in terms of quality. You believe so strongly in your faith that even me, being schooled in Asunta with a huge cross at the hall and an active singing Catholic, non-Catholic society will not deter you. Thank you.